Hello everyone and welcome to Module 5. Today we're going to be talking about honouring the Modru, the Disir and the Elves. So in this lesson, in this module, we're going to cover firstly the Modru or the Matronae or the Matres, basically the mothers they are. Then we'll talk about the Disir. Then we're going to talk about the Norns and the Lesser Norns. And in particular, how we're going to honour them, okay? Then after that, we'll start talking about the Alpha, which are the elves. We're going to talk about the concept of the Azir and Alpha, the Alpha and the dead, and whether the Alpha are good or bad, and then finally also how to honour the Alpha or the Alpha, okay? So let's get started by looking at the Modru and the Matronae. So the Modru, or the Romans is the Matris and the Matronae, the Anglo-Saxon is the Modru. This essentially means the mothers or the motherly ones. Okay, now it comes from the Rhineland area in Germany. It's a syncretism between. You've got the Romans coming in, you've got the Celts that live there, you've got the Germans that live there, all are sort of around the Rhine River. And they all sort of melt and mix and exchange ideas and create something unique to themselves, basically. And you don't really see this happen in other areas. But what you do see is that as people from this area move out, they bring that cult with them, okay? And what's particularly important is that because the Romans came into this area and they have a habit of recording things by building sort of stone statues and altars and things, we know that these things existed. We know that there was this cult for mothers. So a lot of the archaeological evidence is actually Roman, but they are Celtic or Germanic deities. Okay, so there's lots of Roman altars, the votive altars that have been found. You can see a picture of one on the right there, but there's also large temples to them. There's one at Pesh and places. So we know they were quite an important cult in that area. In England, we've got altars at Hadrian's Wall and at Gloucester, which we think were brought here by Germanic military units. So the Germanic peoples would sometimes work for the Romans and join the army. And then they would get stationed all over the empire and they would bring their cults with them, but use Roman ways to record things and to honor them, using like the altars and things. So what are they? What are the mothers? Well, they are a group of local female tutelary spirits, okay? They're not national spirits or international spirits. They are local ones, okay? Focus on a particular tribe or place. Usually they're found in a group of 3, as you can see in the picture on the right, but there are examples of where they're found in a group of or on their own. And often you'll see an inscription with them which says like mothers of the tribe or the clan, or mothers of the river, or mothers of the place. Okay, so they're very much associated with a particular place or a particular tribe or clan that lives in a particular place. Okay, they're very much a local group of spirits. Okay. Now, if we have a look in the Celtic beliefs, they particularly emphasize goddesses of particular rivers and springs. You can think of like the River Severn in the west of England, or Aqua Sulis, which is Bath. That's the spirit there is Sulis. Or Minerva, as the Romans called her. So there's lots of female, usually individual spirits of a particular river or water source or spring or something like that, okay? So this is sort of very similar idea. Now, they can also be called dea, which in Roman, which means goddesses. So they're not just low-level spirits. They're pretty important spirits, pretty important goddesses, basically. And it's the Romans called them the dea, the goddesses. Now, they're associated with a whole range of different things. Okay, in Cumbria, we've got some inscriptions that talk about the mothers of fate. Okay, so they control fate. We've got them being in charge of prosperity and abundance, of childbirth, and again that comes into the fate idea of setting fate when someone's born as a child. Justice, healing, war, fortune, basically loads of different areas of life. They become the sort of the main go-to for that. And Gail Owen, the historian, says fertility and childbirth were their province, and in Germany and Scandinavia they were long remembered for their power to determine a child's destiny. So there we are again, fate and childbirth. Okay, the child's destiny. It's Stephen Pollington. He says they were also specifically associated with well springs, with streams, and with the well-being of households. Okay, so we're coming back to that river idea, or springs. Okay, now we can tell a lot about what they were for from looking at their statues. So you've got statues which include them nursing children. They have bowls of fruit in their laps often. They have images of like snakes or trees or vessels of water, seashells, birds, sacrificial goats, boats, dogs, spinning gear. There's lots and lots of imagery. The snakes in particular show links to fertility and the underworld and the dead. So they're associated with so many different things. Okay, which means they probably were like a go-to number one main goddess to go to, or group of goddesses to go to about any problem you have. Okay, and so they are very, very important. Okay, or at least they were very important at that time. Now, many of their names also emphasize that they're giving nature. Okay, they are the givers. So there's a very generous group of goddesses and spirits. Okay, and Pollington again, he says they have names of Germanic types, mostly referring to the bountiful and wish-fulfilling nature of the mothers. Okay, so they're very much deities who give us things. Okay, if we ask for them. Okay, now they are tutelary spirits. So tutelary spirit basically means they're the spirit of the clan, of the family, of the they look after and guide a particular group of people. Okay, so you could see them as sort of family spirits, as guardians of the family, not or of the clan, not like an individual tiny little family, but like a larger group of a family, like an extended family. Okay, now there are over 1,000 inscriptions that have been found to them. Okay, and there's all sorts of names, but the main ones are Austria-Henne and Orfanier. They're the most common ones. I think we found about 150 of the Austria-Henne ones, and they actually are potentially linked to the goddess Aostra as well, because Austria means sort of east and eastern. Okay, and it could be like Eastern peoples. Okay, so the goddesses of the Eastern peoples. Dirks in 1998, he argues that they are evidence of an ancestor cult. So he calls them the mythical mothers of the larger Civitas community. So you imagine there's a clan of people that originally would have gone back to a very small family probably, and these are the mothers in that very early family, perhaps, which then become the ancestral mythical mothers for the large community as it starts growing and expanding out. Shaw, he writes a brilliant book called Pagan Goddesses of the Germanic World, and very, very worth reading. You can buy it online. It's not too expensive. And he says the matrons, or the mothers, the Modru, they seem generally to reflect local cults specific to small-scale social political groupings, perhaps kin groups. So again, we've got this emphasis on the local. Okay, they are local. They're not just for one tiny family. They're not your own personal ancestors, mothers, grandmothers, maybe great grandmothers. Okay, they refer to the local tribes, which at that time was probably just an extended family, small scale group, but they are the local cult for those people. Okay, Pollington says on the inscriptions, most were probably set up by soldiers serving on foreign soil, seeking to create a link with their homes and families. Okay, so again, it's as I said, when they've come up to say Gloucester or Hadrian's Wall in England, they've brought their they brought the cult with them, set up statues, but they're trying to create a link here with their homes and their families, because it represents their home area. The Modru, the mothers, are the local spirits of that home area that they came from, of that home people that they came from. Okay. Now, they are probably related to the Norse Disir and or the Norns. Okay, there seems to be this thing across all the Germanic groups of a set of female deities which are to do with the family, with the local area and tribe, that are to do with fate, that to do with childbirth and giving. It's all the sort of, they seem to be very much similar, but maybe seen in slightly different ways from different groups. The Modru, the matris and matrinae are more sort of continental Germanic or Anglo-Saxon, as we're going to see, whereas the Disir and the Norns are very much more the Norse way of doing things. Okay. Now, I have my own personal interpretation of these beings. For me, they are the female guardian spirits of a specific river valleys and the people who live there. Okay, that's how I see them. I see them as there's a river running through a valley. The people move into that valley. The first sort of mother, there's the first female of that tribe, become the ancestral mothers who look after that family, that tribe, and also that valley and that area. And it's all linked together basically, and they oversee the whole thing. But essentially, they are local female spirits or female guardians of a particular people or place. Okay. So let's then look at the Disir in the Norse. Okay. So firstly, many female spirits are called Disir in Scandinavia. Okay, and they're portrayed differently in different texts. As we've emphasized before in this course, different places and different groups will see things slightly differently. Okay, there was not just one standard pan-Germanic, pan-Scandinavian view. Okay, it's hard to get a clear view of what they are. It depends really on the person, the time, and the place. Okay, there doesn't seem to be a clear distinction between the Disir, the Valkyries, the Norns, the Fylgers, just women of high status, the goddesses, and the Hummingas. Okay, or Hummingas. They are all interrelated, all called the same sort of things all the time. Okay. Snorri, he says, a woman is also referred to in kennings by means of all the goddesses or Valkyries or Norns or Disir. That's in Skaldskaparmál. So this is just a normal everyday woman, can be called any of these things as well. Okay, so that makes it quite hard to distinguish and understand what's going on. Dis is the name for a woman or lady in Old Norse. Okay, it was common in personal names in Old Norse and on the continent as well. Possibly the original form of it was an Old Norse term for goddess, but that's a guess. And in Skaldic kennings, which are the sort of older, more standardized, harder to change versions of the poetry, the kennings for Disir mean goddess. So they definitely mean women, but they also definitely mean goddess. Okay. Valkyries are called Odin's Disir. Okay, so there we've got Valkyries in this case. Freya is Vanadis, the Dis of the Vanir tribe. Okay. Hel is Jodis, Dis of the horses. And Skadi is Onderdis, the Dis of snowshoes. Okay, these are three goddesses, but are also called Dis, with sort of extra bits on their name. You've also got places in Norway and Sweden that are named after the Disir. So you've got Disirberg, which is like the mountain of the Disir, Disin. And this shows an important cult, okay, for the Disir. The Disir were a really important part of Old Norse heathenry. Okay, they don't get as much emphasis nowadays, but they were in the olden days a really important part. They also have their own festivals. So they have the Disir, which is normally sort of October, November time. You have Disir Thing, which is in Sweden was it's like an assembly for the Disir. This was in sort of February time, and then also honoured in the home. And there's evidence of Disir halls, so they have their own temples and halls, which show how important they were. So, what can the Disir do? How does the lore portray them? So firstly, they can appear in dreams. Okay, they can advise, they can warn, they can threaten. They're referred to as dead women in Atla 28. So are they possibly female ancestors? Krakamar 29, if you've seen Ragnar Lothbrok's portrayed in the Vikings or anything, he says in his death speech, Heim bejotha mer Disir, the Disir invite me home. Okay, so there's something here to do with death and Valkyries and leading people to the afterlife. In Icelandic, there are the Landisisteinar, which are the land Disir stones. Okay, so perhaps they also can be land spirits, in which case they might be related to fertility or again to female ancestors. Helga Vidar Hjorvadssonar 29 suggests that they bring fertility and good harvest. So you often find that with beings that are associated with the dead, they're also associated with harvest and fertility. Okay, so potentially there's that aspect to them. As is the festival of Disir in the autumn. Because it's in the autumn, that suggests there's a harvest role there for them. As we said, you've got Disirberg, which is the rock or the mountain of the Disir, and Disirhrois, which is the stone pile of the Disir. That goes back to the altars that we talked about, the stone pile holders. Okay. They are synonymous with Valkyries in Regensmal and Krakamau. So they are warriors, and they're often associated with impending death in many texts. Okay, because they can bring death, they can show that death's about to come. So there's all this thing about dead, about harvest and fertility, and yeah, they are. The image is quite similar across a lot of the texts actually on this bit. Their role is often to defend their chosen heroes in battle. So there they've got a protective role. So they don't just bring people or kill people and bring them to the afterlife, or they are the dead, but actually they're also protectors to stop people dying. So you've got the Volsunga saga, Helgi and the Sigrun or Svava tales, which show the Disir as basically defending their heroes. Okay, so they can be protective, but they can also turn against you. For instance, Odin says that a man is about to die, or to a man about to die, that basically the Disir are angry. And there's also the story of Fidrandi, where he is at probably doing Alpha Blot or Disir Blot, and they're in their home, and he's warned not to go outside. And then he does go outside. He hears a knock at the door. He goes outside, and there's these women there. I think it's 7 dark and 7 light women, who are then referred to as Disir later, and they strike him dead. So they can kill as well. They can protect. They can bring harvest and fertility. They can take you to the afterlife, but they can also kill if they're angry. And Sigdrifa in Sigdrifa Mal tells Sigurd to ask the Disir to help a woman in labor. So again, this is coming back to the fertility harvest side of things, but it's in childbirth this time, and to help a woman in labor. So they're associated with that side of things as well. Okay. They seem to be very similar to the Norns. Okay. Now the Norns are these three beings who carve men's fates. And there's groups of Norns. There's the three main Norns, and there's also these lesser Norns. Okay. But Disir actually can be sometimes a synonym for the Norns. In Hamdismal and Grimnismal, they are the same thing, basically. Norns and Disir are the same thing. But interestingly, Snorri in the Prose Edda, he refers to many of these lesser Norns, okay? And they are there at childbirth. They set each person's fate. They bring both good and bad. As you can see in Helgavida Dingsbana 1, okay? So these are not the three main Norns. They're sort of lesser Norns, basically, they're at childbirth, okay? And that might be the same thing as the Disir, okay? The lesser Norns and the Disir may be the same sort of thing. They're often seen as the spirits of female ancestors or fate goddesses who can be favorable or antagonistic or hostile to humans, okay? So they're not totally good, they're not totally bad. It depends how you treat them, how you act. Are you being good? Are you being bad towards them? Are they just having a bad day? So they could be female ancestors. They could be fate goddesses. Okay. At death, it says they call their kin home. Okay. So again, this suggests that some sort of family connection. They can cause people to do things. So there's a saying the Disir incited us to do this. Okay, so they can also cause you to do things. In Saxo, it talks about this Danish king Fridleif, who took his son Olaf to the temple to pray to three maidens sitting on three seats, and they grant gifts and curses to the boy. So this is really interesting. So there's a temple set up, and there are three maidens sitting on three seats. So they're there to represent essentially the Norns. Okay. And they give gifts to a boy and also curses to a boy. So they're acting like these lesser Norns or even the major Norns, of dishing out fate for what's going to happen to that boy in his life. Okay, gifts of good things, curses of bad things, etc. In Thidrandi Thaturok Thorholds, they seem to be female protective guardian spirits of a person or family and clan's luck and good fortune. So they're associated with death, they're associated with harvest, they're associated with fate and setting a person's fate at childbirth. They can call you home at death, they can give you things, gifts. They can be protective, guardian spirits of a person or family, particularly the luck and good fortune. Okay. The text also refer to our Disir. Okay, and a woman says to her husband, your Disir. So that suggests a very much a family thing. So the tutelary spirits attached to a particular neighborhood, a family, or person is what we're suggesting here. Okay, so they're not for everybody. They're local. They're associated with a particular family or clan or tribe. Okay, and then Jarl Hakon Sigurdsson. He has a temple to Thorgerdr Holgabrdr, or Thurgerd, bride of Helgi, okay, and her sister Erpa. And they may have been his family Disir. And he does certain things, like he gives her silver and takes a ring for good luck. He makes sacrifices to them, okay? So these are actually to be his Disir. So, if we look at the Old English, let's see how this and even continental Germanic stuff, how this relates. So a possible Old English equivalent to this is Ides or Ides. And this means high-born woman or lady or woman of high status. Okay. And Wagner says in our Troth books, both Idis and Dis are applied to living human women of high status, to deceased female ancestors, to goddesses, and to monsters. So they do seem to be very, very similar. The EDC are mentioned in the first Merseburg charm, and in that charm, essentially, they're a group of women goddesses who protect fighters, and they bind their enemies or armies. Okay, so again, this is shows the role that they can have of protecting and binding. An Old English gloss for so a gloss is where you take one word in one language, and then to make it more understandable in another language, you put your own word on top. Okay, so like you've got the dryads, for instance, in Greek, they might have been translated as elves or something in Old English texts. And in the Virgo Invenculo, the gloss for Eads was maiden with foresight. And the sagas mention spa Disir. So spa is divination or prophecy or foresight. So prophecy Disir, essentially. Tacitus, he also talks about prophetic women, about the fact that women in Germanic tribes were seen as special because they had the gift of prophecy, or it's thought to be strong within women. And they even have particular special women seers as well. So the Edis here are able to give prophecy. Okay, like we said, they can appear in dreams and warn and advise and stuff. Now we've got prophecy coming into the mix. Now, Turville Petra, on the word Edis, he says, the word was long regarded as the same as Old Norse dis, but because of philological difficulties, later scholars have favoured another etymology. Even if not related, the words Edis and dis are sufficiently alike for the poetical usage of the first to influence that of the second. So they don't go back to the same etymological root word. Okay, that's what's being said here. But the ideas are so similar for these things that they influence each other. Okay, and how they were seen. So we've got here an example of how the Disir potentially are also within the Anglo-Saxon and the continental side of things. So let's go further into sort of talking about the Norns and the Lesser Norns again. So the Norns are three female entities, which we've already talked about when we talked about cosmology. So you've got Urther, Verdandi, and Skuld. Urther means that which is coming into being. Okay, Urther is the same thing as weird, basically. The word weird and the word Urther are the Norse and Old English equivalents. Verdandi is becoming, and Skuld is should or debt. Okay. The Old English word fate, the Old English word weird, which means fate, is the same as the Urther, as I said. However, the Old Norse word for fate itself is orlog. Okay, so it's not, Urther is not the Norse word for fate. Okay, whereas the Old English equivalent weird is. Now, Voluspa in the Poetic Edda, it says this about the Norns. I know an ash tree stands called Yggdrasil, a tall tree sprinkled with white mud. From it come dews that fall in valleys. It ever stands green over earth's well. From there come maidens, knowing much. 3 from the hall that stands under the tree. One is named Earth, the second Verdandi. They carved on planks. Skuld the third. They lay down laws, they choose lives for the children of men to speak their destiny. So here it's talking about how the 3 Norns come out each day from the hall under the tree of Yggdrasil, the world tree. They come to the earth's well, and then they carve men's fates on wood, basically. They lay down laws and choose lives and speak their destiny. In Scandinavian countries, they seem to carve rather than weave. Okay, so we have mentioned this before, but the idea of weaving is more of a Greek idea, Roman idea, whereas in Scandinavia it's more carving. But, as we also said, the Anglo-Saxon and the continental sources also suggest weaving as well. So, for instance, they have the idea of, or the saying, weird wove this for me in the texts. Okay, so there is weaving as well involved in the Norns. Old English texts glossed the Latin parse. So parse is the Latin word for the Greek fates, okay, with weirder or gewirder. Okay, so we have here weird being associated with fates, okay, from the Greek and the Latin. And in Shakespeare, you've got they sort of evolve into the weird sisters. Okay, you'll find them in Shakespeare. Now, people often consulted seers to know their fate. Okay, so people believed in fate. They believed in the Norns. They believed that they could find out about their fate, which was already written, okay, by those Norns. So they go to seers, and they wanted foreknowledge of their fate. Okay, that's what Eric the Red Saga says. Okay, which clearly shows that they did believe in this. Now, even the gods can't escape their fate. Okay, the gods are lower than the Norns in terms of the hierarchy of who has the most control and power. The Norns are the ones at the very top who are setting everything, the fate. They even set the fate for the gods. Okay, and they determine when Ragnarok is going to happen, which ultimately is when a lot of the gods die. Now, the Norns are also mentioned in the Old Saxon Heliand, but they're called the Weird Yeshapu, which means the weird shapers. Okay, so this is even on the continent. You've got examples of the weird, of the fate, but they're called the shapers this time. Okay, as though they shape fate. And the Heliand also suggests that they come to us at our fateful hour, at our hour of death. Okay. Now, there are also lesser Norns mentioned by Snorri, as we've said, and in Fafnismal as well. And they can be good or they can be bad, and they will set our fates at birth. So the Prose Edda by Snorri says, there are yet more Norns, those who come to each person at birth to decide the length of one's life. The good Norns, the ones who are well born, shape a good life. When people experience misfortune, it is the bad Norns who are responsible. And Fafnismal says, which are those Norns who go to help those in need and bring children forth from their mothers? From very different tribes, I think the Norns can't come. They are not of the same kin. Some spring from the Disir, some from the elves. Some are daughters of Dvalin. Dvalin's like the dwarves. Okay. And you've got Helgi Hindusbani poem, which says, at the birth of Helgi, night fell on the estate. Then came Norns, those who shaped fate for the prince. They plied very strongly the strand of fate. They prepared the golden threads. So here we've got the one other example of where the Norns are talked about as using threads and weaving and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so again, you can have the idea of threads and weaving by the Norns in and fate being woven in Heathenry. But all three of these texts here are showing that at birth, some Norns, usually these are sort of lesser Norns, and they can come from all sorts of different tribes. Some of them will come at birth and they will set fates in progress for newborn babies, basically. They set our fates at that point. So that's probably why they're associated with childbirth as well, because mothers are likely to have prayed to them to ask for a good fate for their kids. Now, Saxo mentions a story of Fridleif going to consult three Norns at the temple. So that's the story we talked about, where the boy was taken to the three women who sat on the three chairs. Okay, so he goes to consult them about his son's fate. Now, two of them give him good virtues, but a third one puts a blemish in his character. Okay, so at birth, they're not just setting our fates, they're setting our character, which ultimately determines our fates. Okay, determines what we'll be like as we grow up and live. Okay, so they They can give good, they can give bad. And people complain about bad fate or misfortune in the lore, saying, a Norn was fierce to us, or a wretched Norn shaped my fate in the early days that I must wade in the water, in Regan's Mount. And death itself is called the judgment of Norns. Okay, so we get this repeated image throughout the text of Norns, of whether they're lesser Norns or the normal great Norns, who are here at childbirth, who are setting fates, who are setting character, who set when we die, that sort of stuff. Okay. So what have we got? If we sum this up, if we take the idea of maybe that the Modru, the Disir, and the lesser Norns are perhaps the same group of spirits, what do we get when we bring them together? So firstly, they seem to be a group of usually 3 or possibly 9 local female entities. They're either noble female ancestors who watch over a family line, or perhaps local goddesses of place, or in many cases they're both. Okay, an ancestor could become a local spirit, a local goddess. They come at birth and they set our fates and our character. So if you think about the fairies that are mentioned in Sleeping Beauty, these seem to be the same sort of image of how the Norns and Modru and Disir were seen. When we die, they call us home at that point. Okay, they decide when we're going to die and lead us home. They have a tutelary role. Okay, they're protecting and defending us and our family, but they can also kill if they're angered. Okay, so we need to stay on good terms with them. Okay, they have a giving nature. They give prosperity and fortune. They give luck and fertility and healing. They have a special interest in childbirth and children. Okay, both looking after them and setting their fates and character. They can appear to us in dreams. They are prophetic. Okay. Now, they may not all be equivalent, but they all seem to have a very similar role. Okay, and it may be that they're different for different places and different people groups. Okay. Personally, I see them as a unique set, basically, of 3 beings who are crossed between very old female ancestors, so not just your most recent ancestors, but really far back, old set of ancestors, local spirits of the land, and the lesser Norns' fate. Okay. And as I said before, they often get missed in heathenry. Okay. But the Modru and the Disir were really central in historical Germanic paganism, as we can see from their festivals, from their temples, from the accounts in the lore. Okay. So how can we honor them? So let's first look at Bede. Okay, this is the Anglo-Saxons, and he says that the 24th of December, okay, was Modron Night or Mother's Night. Okay. And this was essentially the Anglo-Saxon New Year, okay? And he says they would celebrate with offerings and prayers for good, we could celebrate, with offerings and prayers for a good fate and prosperity in the year ahead. Now, he's talking about the 24th of December, but that was also seen essentially as the solstice time. So you could do this on the solstice instead, okay? Now, the Anglo-Saxons, it says, this is what he literally says, the Anglo-Saxons began the year on the 8th calends of January, which is the 25th of December, when we celebrate the birth of the Lord. That very night, which we hold so sacred, they used to call by the heathen word Modronit, that is, Mother's Night, because we suspect of the ceremonies they enacted all that night. Okay, now that's all the information we actually have about Modron Night. Okay, but we can do a few things here. So firstly, it seems to be the heathen New Year. Okay, because it says they began their year. Okay, so you've got New Year stuff. We've got the whole cult of the mothers, which we talked about, the cult of Modru. Okay, which are to do with fate and prosperity and the future and all that sort of stuff. So we can suggest that they're looking for fate and prosperity in the year ahead. We can see they had ceremonies and they enacted them all night. Okay, so you can take those sort of ideas and make your your celebration of the mothers that way. Now, there's a 12th century German church, Correctus Penitential, which condemns people because of honouring these female deities. It says, "Did you do as certain women do during a certain time of the year? Did you set 2 tables and fix 2 meals in your house? Did you put a drink on the table, along with 3 knives, in case the 3 sisters arrive? Previous generations called them the Fates out of ignorance. Did you do these things so that the Fates could be refreshed?" So here we've got an example of an actual ceremony and how it might work. So it's talking about a particular time of the year. I'm going to suggest here that maybe it is the solstice. It talks about putting out tables and meals for them, as well as drinks and knives for them. Okay, specifically for the 3 sisters, the 3 Fates, basically the 3 mothers. And yes, and it's to refresh them, basically. So this is a way, or we can take these ideas and build ourselves a ceremony, giving offerings of drink and food and some knives for the Modru, the Norns, the lesser Fate, the lesser Norns, the Disir. Put them out overnight, and maybe with prayers for the good fate or prosperity in the year ahead. Now, there's also some other examples of things that were done in the lore. So you've got the Disir Blot I mentioned, which is a sacrifice to the Disir. And this happens at winter nights in Vigaglum Saga and Egil Saga. And winter nights was sort of the full moon around about October time. So it was the start of winter. So the Anglo-Saxons seem to have done it around the solstice period, or the 24th of December, whereas the Norse seems to have done it around the beginning of winter, so around October time. So you could do it at different times, okay? You could take the idea of it, them being ancestors, female ancestors at Halloween, and do it at Halloween. Now, the Disting, or the Disthing, the disassembly, there was a fair or a market in Sweden. And Heimskringla, it says it was around February, March time. So again, there's a third time when you could potentially do it as a date. So you've got sort of October, you've got December, and now you've got February and March time. So you can choose which time you want to do it, okay? Which makes most sense for you, okay? It talks about the Disir Haller, the Hall of the Disir, okay? So, I mean, we're probably not going to have halls for the Disir for a long time. Paganism just isn't that big at the moment for that, but that's something to consider in the future. And then you've got the mention of the land Disir Steiner, so stones of the land Disir. You've got Disir Berg, Disir Hroys, which show that they were venerated at stones. So you could set up a altar of stones specifically for them and honor them there. Okay, so we talked about the stone altars in our gardens. Okay, so then you've got prayers, okay, that you can make at particular times. And Sigrid from Mal, as we said, suggests that they should be done to assist in labour. But I would also suggest that, based on the idea that this guy, the king, took his child to go and get the Norns to, or the women who were portraying themselves as Norns, to set the fates of the child. This would suggest that at the birth of a child is another time that would be good for praying for a good fate, because we know that the Norns, or the lesser Norns, are coming to set the child's fate at that point. So another way you can honour them, prayer for good fate or for assistance in labour. Divination. So we know that they're called Spa Disir, prophetic Disir, or the maidens with foresight. So you can ask them for help through divination. You could do some divination and ask them for help. We could give them offerings, but the question is, what sort of offerings are good to give to them? Well, if we have a look at what their images are shown as, particularly the Modru statues that the Romans made, we can see them with various different things, but particularly fruits like apples and pears, bread, and coins. Okay, so these are all things that you could give as offerings to the Modru, the Disir. Okay, and particularly apples and pears are good because in the winter that's when they're in season, and so it would sort of be a seasonal offering basically at that point. Some images also show humans bring animal offerings or pouring libations. Okay, so libations is a liquid offering of some kind. So you could do that. There's obviously altars being created for them by the Romans, so you could create them their own altar. Okay, and they've also created clay figurines, so you could create your own little clay figurines for them. Now, the mothers, they are sometimes portrayed wearing these crescent-shaped pendants. Okay, so does that mean they're associated with the moon, and particularly the crescent moon? Okay, so at the very beginning of the month, the first crescent moon. So this is just a hypothesis, but perhaps you could honor them on the crescent moon. It would make sense if they're about sort of fate and prosperity and things like that. You might want these in the coming month. So the crescent moon, the start of the month, you can therefore pray for these things during the month by honoring those mothers at that point. And potentially you could wear a crescent pendant as well as like a symbol of your honoring them. Okay. Now in Heathenry Thatcher of Thorholds, it mentions that again the offerings were given to the Disir. In Flateyar book, we've got them being given silver. That was the Jarl who was giving it giving silver to a couple of local Disir. One thing you could do is you could weave crafts. So the Norse, the Disir, and that, as we said, they may focus on carving, but women in general, and even those cases that we saw about weird wove this for me and stuff, they're associated with weaving. So maybe you want to create some sort of weaving craft as a way to honor them. Okay. There is an example of a Modru holding a spindle, okay, which should again suggest that there is some sort of association with weaving and stuff there. Now, hopefully you're starting to remember your dreams now. So pay attention if they do visit you in dreams, in case they have any messages for you. Build an altar to them. As we said, the altars were created in Roman times. So you could set up a space on your altar, maybe on your ancestor altar, or maybe on a local spirit's altar, however you want to do it. You can put female ancestors on there, or an image of the mothers. So you can find maybe print out an image of one of the old Roman altars with the three mothers there. However, something just to be aware of, okay, is that they are a special class of beings, a special set of beings. They are not just your personal female ancestors, okay? So just because your grandmother died or great-grandmother died or whatever, and you feel close to them, that does not mean that she is a Disir or a lesser Norn or anything like that, okay, or Modru mothers. This is a special particular class of beings. It's possible that at some of your ancestors got elevated up to that level, but it doesn't mean all your ancestors are. There seems to be this thing in heathenry that all your female ancestors are called Disir. That's not correct, okay, not when we look at the lore. There's hints that there are ancestral elements to it, but that they're not just your ancestors. They are a special group of beings. And they're also not just the Norse goddesses as a whole. That's another mistake that's made in heathenry sometimes. That we say that all the Disir are all the Norse goddesses. They're not. Again, the goddesses are different. Okay, they can be associated with this word Disir or Dis, like we saw Vanadis and stuff like that, but they are not the collective name for all the Disir, all the goddesses. Okay, the Disir are a special group of goddesses. The mothers, they're a special group of goddesses. Okay, so I'm going to finish this video here, and the next video we're going to talk about the Alpha or the Alpha, which are the elves.